very last day of the Mobile World Congress 2015 I think it's sunny outside. I have no idea because they never let me out of the halls. And I'm talking to Linsey Miller. Linsey, I'm sorry I forgot your microphone.
Thank
You should have a microphone. We want to hear you.
Big.
Linsey Miller from Artesyn. You're the product marketing director for server acceleration business.
Yes.
So you've been also here at the Mobile World Congress for the whole week, right?
Yes, this is the bitter end for me.
we always made it, right? So what are you excited about? I mean, this is super busy. It's getting busier each and every year, but I'm pretty sure that you've been also walking around a little bit.
Yeah, I'm really excited about OTT.
Okay.
And I'm really excited about the convergence of what's happening with content providers and service providers. And it's just happening from all angles. I mean, myself, I think I'm a perfect use case of what's going on.
Yeah.
I don't ever turn on my TV at home, but my phone is my TV.
Yeah.
So I can stream content wherever I want to go.
Yeah.
If I'm bored and waiting in line at the airport or I'm home, it's great. Content is everywhere. And so what's really hot this year at the show is OTT, video especially, and also speech transcoding and what we can do now with Intel GPU accelerated technology. So at Artesyn, that's what my group focuses on. We take all that innovation that Intel has put in place with GPU accelerated technology and we make it available in standard servers. So our customers, whether they're telecom equipment providers building out the infrastructure for OTT, or whether they're service providers and they're getting hands-on about handling that crippling amount of video, they can do that with standard servers and with x86 technology.
Yeah, this is actually something that we tend to forget about, right? We are constantly talking about the latest devices and how we're going to use it. We need to also have some infrastructures and ecosystems around this. And this is actually where Mobile World Congress is coming from. This started as a very enterprisey B2B infrastructure show. And it turned into something where all the latest consumer electronic devices are being launched. But behind that, there's still a backend, and you're delivering to this backend.
Right, and what's really key at Mobile World Congress as far as that evolution you talked about, last year SDN and NFV was a really big thing, but it was a lot of proof of concept work, and really, the rubber hadn't met the road yet, and what's great about this year is we're actually seeing those virtual network functions out there, and Intel is a really easy change agent for virtual network functions because x86 is an easily deployable technology for a virtual network function. But, those first applications that made it over were really more control plane, signaling type applications. What we're doing with Intel now, what Artesyn is doing with our SharpStreamer technology, is bringing that virtual network function to the user plane. So when we talk about video transcoding, or we talk about doing things like session border controllers, media gateways, what you need in a voice over LTE network or for a WebRTC type application, that's actually happening now with virtual network functions.
What you just mentioned is a very interesting use case of how we're consuming content in these days. Because I'm exactly the same. I have a TV set. I still have my set-top box. I'm paying for this on a monthly basis. I never, ever watch it because I kind of got out of this linear world of content providing, right?
Right.
I want to consume the content when I have time, and then I need the proper backend to handle it.
Yeah, and on your schedule.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
And even the concept of the DVR, which was great because it let us set our schedule, is becoming antiquated.
Are we still using them?
It's a set-top box. It's going to go the way of the dodo bird, right?
Yeah.
So what's really cool is the network PVR function. And that's where you see the content providers and service providers start to take that functionality out of the endpoint and put it in the network so that we can stream that whenever we want, and we're no longer burdening everything with these set-top boxes.
Yeah. And due to the bandwidth that we have in these networks right now, not only on a landline, but on optical connection or optical fiberglass connection, but even on mobile right now, Intel announced with their new Intel Atom X3, X5, and X7, they've been launching LTE Cat6 modems. But I've been also talking to Herman Yule over here like yesterday, and he was sitting on the 5G panel. So that's the next big thing. We're still working hard on really rolling out 4G everywhere.
Right.
But of course, they're already planning 5G.
Yeah.
And this will also make, a completely new streaming methods happening.
So you touched on a really important point right now, which is bandwidth. So, I mean, you look at what I can do watching one episode of Netflix on an LTE network, I'm going to pull down a gigabyte of data.
Yeah.
So, if I'm on some unlimited data plan, that's all well and good. But for the service provider, that is really important.
Yeah.
Because that's going to strain their network. And a lot of the service providers, thanks to net neutrality, they don't really have a way to monetize that.
Yeah.
So then it becomes very important to reduce the cost of the infrastructure because the users are going to make you support that video no matter what. And video takes up 75% of the bandwidth on the network. It will cripple your network. Yeah. And people are not just bringing video down like you watching a show, but they're also posting it up.
Yeah.
I mean, social media is a great catalyst for that. Taking clips, on Instagram or, submitting YouTube videos up to the network. That's coming upstream too. So bandwidth is really key. And so what we're doing with Intel and what the GPU acceleration gives us on Core i7 and Core i5 technologies is the ability to do so many more streams in a much smaller footprint. So what Artesyn does is we take the amount of streams that the network can support and we just absolutely multiply that. If you look at the capacity of what a standard CPU host processor can do in let's say a one-use server with one CPU, that's about 6 streams of 1080p HD. So if I'm talking about video transcodes. And what we're showing here at the show with Intel is actually GPU accelerated that gives us 176 streams in the same 1U footprint.
Oh, yeah, that's amazing. You touched a very, very important point. Yes, if you're on an unlimited contract, and I mean, in these days, it's all about data. Voice is data. And actually, I can't even remember when I made my last phone call. It's been a while.
That's why I got an iPhone 6. It's gigantic, but I actually read and, watch things more than I make phone calls on it. Yeah.
And so this is all about data and how much traffic we're producing. And of course, we have an exponential growth when it comes to the mobile traffic to see how I can optimize it. And actually, especially for the European market, that's kind of tricky because those unlimited data plans are not really existing over here in Europe.
Right.
I pay in Taiwan. I have an LTE contract. It's about $35 for unlimited LTE. Actually, I don't even need a landline. I have like 70 Mbit down and 20 Mbits up where I live on LTE.
Right.
For $35, which is amazing.
And that is going to be so, think about places where there really isn't capacity in a landline and the first network that's going to be there is wireless.
Absolutely.
So we're now entering into an era where a wireless service provider or an alternative service provider, a Wi-Fi provider, can offer some sort of a OTT multicast service where people are actually going to be consuming content that they never even had in the first place over a cable or a wireline infrastructure.
You know where they're actually doing it? I think in Scandinavia, they have all these unlimited, especially in Finland. Right? A good friend of mine lives in Finland, and we were doing podcasts together, and I was there. Jesus, it's kind of hard to guess because it's always cold in Helsinki, but I still think it was in the summer. It was in June last year or the year before, and it was snowing. We went on a boat and have a little bit of a harbor tour, and all of a sudden it was snowing. They have an amazing network over there. Well, of course, they only have like 4 or 5 million citizens.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty big country for 4 or 5 million citizens, and the network coverage was absolutely amazing. They had a super fast LTE, and it almost cost nothing. It was like $20 or $30 again.
Right.
And we would get there all over the world, and this kind of helps you guys, of course, Well, it's a challenge for you guys, first of all, right? Just to provide enough infrastructure for this.
Yeah.
But it's just perfect for your market.
Right. So with some of the things that the smart service providers are doing is when you are in an area where you don't have unlimited data, and the service provider can't necessarily make more money off the OTT content, they're starting to leverage certain OTT content. For example, taking certain OTT content from third parties, like let's say Spotify, for example, and making that free as part of their contract. It's really smart because it gives the service provider a way to have a more sticky relationship with the customer and to reduce the churn while they're trying to incorporate more content of their own, so that customers have a preference for that service provider, because really the customer preference is with the OTT provider.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm not going to get a good feed on Hulu, then I'm going to go try Netflix or iTunes or whatever way I can get to the content. The content is what's making the decision for me about what I'm going to do, not necessarily the service.
I really like this perspective. It's because this also tells a lot about how telcos had to change recently. When you look back at their business model like 20 years ago, it was just messaging. They made I remember a time when a single message in Germany cost like 29 cents.
Yeah.
But I also remember a time on CompuServe where you had to pay for an email, right? So, but this is so over right now, and now they had to make this transition into this network world, of data-enabled network world, and they have to figure out a way how they can monetize this again. And I think videos and all these services, these are amazing possibilities for them.
It becomes really challenging with net neutrality because you can't really monetize it from the consumer. So then the operator knows they need to be able to offer those services, and how can they, be more profitable as a business? A lot of that is by reducing the number of vendors they use inside their infrastructure, and also just making that infrastructure much more lean and cost effective and handle greater capacity. So that's a key thing. And the other thing is 5G. It's really exciting about what 5G can do, because it's going to offer that convergence between the fixed wireless network and the wireless network that we use today. And the majority of this content that is really bandwidth hungry is actually it's actually consumed over that fixed wireless network. So you may be in a situation where someday you actually contract with a Wi-Fi provider and you roam on the wireless network as opposed to the opposite. So we're seeing a lot of convergence there.
It's interesting with what you mentioned about the net neutrality, that what kind of impact it has on the monetization for telcos and for the content. But of course, it's also very, very important. And I mean, you're coming from a country that is definitely really making some strong statements. And I think what the U.S. is doing and the U.S. government is doing and how they're working together with their industry and pushing net neutrality into the market is just. It's kind of a role model even for Europe. We still have this discussion over here.
Right.
It's quite interesting to see that.
And now we kind of have similar models. Because in North America now we'll have net neutrality, and at least in the United States, and there's net neutrality in Europe. So before, we actually thought net neutrality was not going to be like it is in Europe. But the key difference between the United States market and Europe is the average revenue per user, or the ARPU. You cannot get an unlimited data contract or any sort of contract for what is the equivalent of 10 euros a month in the United States. I was shocked when I saw that. I mean, we pay like $150 a month in the United States. So it's wildly different. It is so much cheaper for the consumer in Europe to get access to the service than it is in the United States.
But you know what? They're going to slow down. They're going to cap the bandwidth. They always have a cap in there. Yes, it is somehow. They still call it a flat rate.
Right.
But then out of a sudden, you're ending up on Edge or on GPRS.
Right.
So you got your 5 gigabytes through, which can happen in no time. Right. And then you have a problem. Yes, you can still. I think I'm on a prepaid card here in Barcelona, and I paid like 30 euros for 2 gigs, which is nice, right? Without any contract, I just need it for 1 week, and I'm all set with it. And it's fast, it's LTE enabled.
Yeah, but 2 gig. That's 2 episodes of House of Cards. So you still have to be careful.
Exactly, but you can watch them in 2 hours, right?
Yeah, but that's your whole card. That's 30 euros, right? So you gotta kind of keep it in perspective. But, in the video space, there's some amazing innovation that's happening now, and that we're also doing jointly with Intel with our Sharp Streamer acceleration at Artesyn around using the latest video codecs. So
that's very important.
Yeah,
here.
so why is HEVC important? HEVC is important, high efficiency video codec, because that content that you want to watch, which formerly took up a lot more bandwidth on the network, is now being able to be compressed and reduced so that you as a consumer can get more content for less euros, and so that the operator can actually handle more content without so much strain on the network.
That's really interesting that you're mentioning this, and you're so right. I had the general manager for marketing of Divix over here yesterday, right? And we were talking about this. I mean, this they have like over 1 billion downloads and I don't know, 1 billion users using the codec, and these are exactly those challenges that these guys are facing. Is how they made the transition over to mobile, and how they can make sure that their compression rate, right, is just properly developed, and that you can still get a proper full HD stream. And in the future, we're talking 4K, and 4K is going to happen on our mobile device.
Right, and the way that 4K has happened is the decoders were out there first. So your TVs are 4K enabled, but the infrastructure is not yet equipped to handle that. But we're starting to see that roll out so that, the encoders and the transcoders in the network can handle 4K resolutions. But, around this show, around Mobile World Congress, when we talk about OTT, the sweet spot is actually nowhere near those resolutions. And for somebody like me who's not watching it at home on a 4K TV, I'm watching it on my phone and probably 480 at best. That use case is a whole lot of streams that aren't that high a resolution, and that really is, where you need high density more so than high quality. And, if I'm on my wireless network or you're on your great LTE network, that's going to be good enough for you.
480 definitely looks good on a 5-inch screen, right? Like you said, the pixel density is what counts, and with 480, you can definitely get a proper one. We also have a couple of 1440p devices. Like we have an LG or Samsung just launched their new ones, which are also running or using a 1440p display on a 5-inch form factor. So the pixel density is like insane, like almost like 600 ppi, which is absolutely crazy. Guess what happened? I have this LG for quite a while, and yes, the display is gorgeous, and they have a couple of sample videos. Especially after I got it for the first 2 weeks, I've been constantly showing this to friends. Like, look at this video, look at this, and then you're not just realizing it anymore. Actually, you're not using these videos. You're not getting your quad HD videos on there anymore,
right?
Because you just don't need it on such a device.
Exactly.
And you can save a lot of bandwidth, a lot of traffic. I like this idea of 480p. It's good enough.
Yeah, and for me, pulling down so much data by actually using a phone as a TV, there are actually settings that you can do with these OTT providers, and I like what the innovative ones are doing, giving the consumer the option to actually reduce that quality in order to reduce the bandwidth. So, this is where you start to question, what can operators do in the face of net neutrality in order to reduce the bandwidth on their network? You have to provide best available service, but what does that mean in terms of the user experience? So it's at the back end, at the network side, our goal really is to just increase the amount of streams that can be streamed out there, and then that if the network is more performant and the cost can come down, it's good for the consumer and it's good for the operator as well.
Plus, it's good to have a proper hardware acceleration, especially for the codecs, right? We're talking about a process that needs a lot of CPU power and a lot of GPU power too.
Especially.
Right, and if you want to get a hardware acceleration on that, it helps you guys, and especially helps your customers to have more simultaneously streams over a single unit that you're selling or that you're renting out.
Yeah, because the old way would have been stacking up servers on servers on servers, and while that's a footprint issue, it's a CapEx issue. You've got all of these servers stacked up, it's not a cost-effective way to solve the problem. And what GPU acceleration gives you is the ability to reduce that footprint and reduce that cost. But that's just CapEx. On the OpEx side, you can bring the cost down significantly. We actually did a three-way white paper with Intel and with Dell, Intel, Dell, and Artesyn, and it was the topic was virtual video transcoding in the cloud. And what we did is we took a next day TV scenario. So let's say a new movie comes out and it's available to be streamed on demand. We took 200 hours of content and we transcoded it into 10 different formats. It takes 24 servers stacked up to do that job. And by doing an Artesyn accelerated server, which uses Intel GPU acceleration technology in a standard 1U server, we did it in one server. So we did on one server what you would have needed 24 for, but on the OpEx side, the power and cooling costs were reduced by a factor of 10. So we went from over 11,000 watts to 1,000 watts of power for that same problem to be solved with GPU acceleration. So that was really exciting. It was just as exciting for our CFOs at customers as it was for the CTO types.
Oh, I bet. You know what I always love about these messages is just to show that, being green, being energy efficient saves you a lot of money, right?
Right, yeah.
Because there's so many people out there think, oh my God, I have to invest much more. No, It's actually the other way around. Technology makes us save money and makes us a greener planet.
Exactly, and that's another thing that Artesyn is doing, because we actually employed the x86 GPU acceleration on a standard PCI Express card. You could retrofit your existing servers already in your network to better handle video by just adding those cards in. They're standard industry cards. So that was a good thing for customers as far as ease of use. The other thing, is really coming back to that virtual network function conversation that we had earlier. What we're doing with Intel and what we're doing with our ISV partners is using OpenStack, which is a way to orchestrate your virtualization in your network and make that a much easier process for doing this video transcoding as a virtual network function that runs on standard servers as opposed to dedicated hardware or bare metal server kind of way to solve the problem.
We started with this talking about infrastructures, and I would really love to thank you to bring up and to be on our live stream and talk about this again, because once again, we always think about this is one-dimensional idea of just having the device and somehow connected to the cloud, right? And there are transmitters and receivers and whatnot. We have this amazing huge server farms. There's a lot of computing power behind this, a very, very complex infrastructure, and it just takes a lot to make this work. For us, it is kind of invisible technology, right?
Yeah.
We are just taking it for granted.
That's true.
It's out there, but it consumes a lot of energy. And so whenever I hear something that processes are getting optimized, that we're working on efficiency, that we can do something where we in the past used to use like 24 servers, and now we can do it on one.
Right.
And even this one server is so it's more efficient in terms of the power consumption than a single one that we used before.
Yeah.
Right. And this is what technology really, really does to us, that it makes it work, that it makes our network run, and that it makes us save energy and save money.
And that's just hardware.
Yeah.
On the software side, you talk about it. It is a pretty daunting task to put all these things in place. But what Intel has done with Intel's Media Server Studio has really made that development experience so much easier for developers, because they've got access to all these codecs that we talked about, ABC, HEVC, libraries of APIs, so that they can take their application and port it to this GPU accelerated technology so much easier than the way they did it before. Before, they were having to use FPGAs and SoCs and buy giant code blocks. You can get access to Intel Media Server Studio without having to pay all that upfront cost. So developers are really excited about what's in place now too on the software side.
Linsey, thank you so much for your time, being here on our stream, telling us a little bit about how you optimize this server infrastructure.
Thank you for having me.
And we're going to have a little break of roughly about 5 minutes. And then we have Tony Anscombe over here together with Steve Chippy Payne. And they're going to talk about AVG. So it's all about security. And I'm an AVG user like for ages, especially on my laptop and on my desktop. It's also going to be quite interesting to see what they're doing in the mobile space. So stay tuned. We're going to be back after a short little break.